I feel I could honestly just give the title of this video a yes or no answer, and if everyone watching took my word for it, we'd all be happy. But I know when it comes to something that people will put their time and eventually money into, these kinds of questions are worthy of being taken seriously with both options considered. Now, I actually started Final Fantasy XIV almost 5 years ago. However, it wasn't until late 2020 when I actually gave it more than an hour of trying out. I'm a person who never really played MMOs. I mean, the biggest game I've ever really played in terms of the amount of players is Club Penguin. So that should show you how little experience I've had with this genre. And because of this, I can't make comparisons to other MMOs. But even without having played anything else, I still find this an easy question to answer. Yes! Especially since if you've never played the game before, it's actually free to play with only a really small restriction up to level 60 that includes the entirety of the base game and its first expansion, Heaven's Ward. In retrospect, I'm actually putting this next part at the beginning since I feel most who are on the fence about playing an MMO are put off by this one point, at least based off what I've seen, is the combat. Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO, so by design at first glance, it certainly looks like it plays like one. Auto attacking and such is accounted for. However, I can't stress this enough, there is so much depth and interactivity to the combat in this game. I'm gonna mention Larizar here. They did a fantastic job of explaining it in the simplest of words. You just need to press buttons. There should never be a time where you're not pressing buttons. Auto attacking is something I feel most people forget is even in this game with all the attacks and abilities you'll end up acquiring. You'll never really have to wait to use your moves after the early game. You'll be stringing together combos, executing new techniques, and trying out new strategies at all times in very fast-paced gameplay. And you need to become good at it because not only are the dungeons fun and the bosses look epic, but you'll need to be epic. These are all things you're doing. You and your team will need to work together to make the magic happen. You're constantly in the zone executing whatever your party needs, whether it's weaving together buffs and heals for the party, or enraging the enemy and taking every bit of his attention away from your friends as you're the only one who could take a major freaking hit from the boss and still be standing. This goes even further where you'll have to be learning the enemy's patterns, learning how to tackle them, dodging its AoEs, learning how to defend your allies, preventing team wipes, and so much more. You'll be bobbing and weaving like a maniac in this game. And now that I've finished Shadowbringers, looking back, if I could describe the gameplay in one word, it'd be kinetic. Purely because, well, it is, and that's regardless of the class you pick. However, I can acknowledge some aspects of the genre may not be for everyone. Going forward, I'm going to assume you have things like time to actually play this kind of game, because while the story does end, the game does not. I know to some the amount of time it takes to beat a game is a deciding factor, but one point I want to bring up is that multiplayer games are the type of games that can basically go on forever, you know, until servers get shut down. So a big thing I want to make known is to play this game like it's a multiplayer game, because it is. While very often you can be playing by yourself, you can still play in the mindset of a multiplayer experience. You can pop in for a bit and dip when you've had your fill. Just like those who play fighting games or shooters, they often come in for a bit and dip out after a few matches. But you can take it further and play those kinds of games for hours upon hours on end to grind and get better. Train your aim, your reaction time, your effectiveness at executing combos. All these things apply to Final Fantasy XIV as well. There's never going to be a time where you feel you can't get better at your class of choice in the game. And speaking of classes, I often hear people say they won't play the game because of the sheer amount of content in the game. Everything from missions to story to classes, it's overwhelming. Here, I could understand. It certainly can feel like a lot. When I mentioned earlier that I didn't really give it a proper chance for years, this is the biggest reason why for me personally. But the thing I learned is that yeah, there's a truckload of content, but you don't have to do most of it. Most of it is completely optional if you so choose, and it's very distinct between what you have to do for story, for your class, and just because. And all of that outside of the story can just never be done if you don't want to. Technically, you can skip all the story if you want to as well. I'm not one of those people to judge someone on this kind of thing, but I do recommend you not skip the story, especially not through buying the skips from the store, as there's tons of exclusive gear and armor sets and items you can only get from actually doing the story, and skipping that would make them inaccessible. Just take things at your own pace. Sure, all that content is there, but you decide when it needs to get done, if at all. Maybe if you have a few friends, you can do some of it together. That way you can get some cool memories out of it too, especially if you're not playing it for story. Now, if we're talking classes, this is where this could become a whole different video, but for the sake of all of our sanity and time, I won't go overboard. Choosing a class is something I feel is important. I could sit here and say pick whatever you want want because it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because you always can just switch again. But I feel if you're gonna get into this game, then yes, it does matter, and you should think about it. Classes can fall under different categories, those being tanks, healers, melee DPS, physical range DPS, or magical range DPS. The reason I feel it's super important to think it through is because the development process for each class is different. The growth cycle for it can lead to a totally different experience in terms of gameplay, especially early on when you don't have much to go on for what this game is gonna play like. I've seen tons of people stop playing the game because they didn't like the way it played, only for them to later realize it wasn't the game itself, it was this specific class they didn't like or didn't fit their style. This was the second biggest reason it took me years to play this game. I started off with Gladiator. Oh my god! Yeah. Anyone who plays this game can imagine how me, someone who's only ever played Club Penguin, must have felt. It wasn't until later on when I finally decided to stop blaming 14 for my own mistakes. I don't blame the class anymore. It just wasn't a good fit for me at the time. So instead I went with Thaumaturge, and I later became a black mage, and I fell in love with the class, and even mained that class all the way up till about halfway into Stormblood. But now I've returned to the tank class I feared so much, and I beat the entirety of Shadowbringers as a Dark Knight. This proved to me it wasn't tanking as a whole I disliked. I was just overwhelmed with what I was expected to do and didn't really attempt to actually see what those things really were. Though backing up again, with classes it does depend on what exactly you're looking for. Some people like casting super powerful magic from afar with Black Mage, while others want to get up close and personal, whether they've got a sword or spear in hand like a Gunbreaker or a Dragoon, or with brass knuckles like a Monk. But some may see themselves wanting a bit of the offensive side and the defensive side of things. That way all your bases are covered. In that situation, Arcanist or Scholar may be more up your alley, or maybe you want to use magic and use a sword, then Red Mage might be more of your style. So yeah, all of these can easily lead to a totally different experience. Some jobs may have a prerequisite class, like if you want to be a Scholar, you have to be an Arcanist first, or if you want to be a Ninja, you've got to learn to be a Rogue first. But with such a wide range of options, I feel it walks that perfect balance where there's a lot to choose from, but if something feels off, there's a similar enough class to where you can switch to it in order to remedy that feeling. It's weird. I feel with this kind of topic I can go on and on and on, but I feel this is more than enough to convince someone to play the game. And I didn't even really mention that this game has arguably the best narrative that this company has ever released for people to play. That alone could be enough for some people. But all in all, yes, Final Fantasy XIV is totally worth playing even now in 2021. The game gets constant updates, the player base is significantly higher than it's ever been, so much to the point they had to release the Endwalker update for the servers early because so many new players were starting the game. I guarantee you that there's a class you'll fall in love with and wreak havoc upon your foes with. There's a crazy wholesome community behind this game too. It's not uncommon for a random veteran to see a new player going about their business and just give them 200,000 gil just to help them out and wish him luck. I would know because this actually happened to me and my friends at a completely different time and place. And yes, I made sure to repay that kindness to another player later on. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is KingdomAce, and remember everyone to play some games, have some fun, and enjoy your day today.